Behind me, we have a set of twins called the Silent Twins. Their names were Jennifer and June. I believe Jennifer is on the left and June is on the right. Um, this is a story that I resonate with because this is basically my story. The level of severity is different. Their severity level of the testimony is way greater than mine's, but they had a disorder called elective or selective mutism, and I had the same thing. I got mine under control when I was younger. It is an extreme anxiety disorder that makes you go mute. It makes you freeze up in the midst of someone talking to you or saying anything. We know how to talk. We just can't, literally cannot talk. Our bodies will not allow us to talk. And a lot of the times it is perceived as a child being rude or a child just being having not having manners. It is very very hard disorder to grow up with, and if you don't get it under control, you become frozen in time and stuck in basically like a prison. You know what I mean? In your own body. And thank God that I believed in Yah at a young age, and I understood that I had to speak, that I had to do something, and I did. And from that point on, I kept on talking. I kept on talking, and one of the main things that they went through, I went through. They were bullied, and a selective mute child, that's the last thing that they want to go through, right? They don't want to be bullied because they don't want any eyes on them. They don't want to be perceived any type of way. They just want to be left alone. And they believe in their minds that if they're quiet enough, they will not be noticed. And of course, what did God do for me to walk in confidence? He allowed eyes to be on me because of being bullied. He allowed people to pick on me. He allowed people to disturb my peace, to to bother me, and to get out of that shell. And I grew into my personality because of it. And when you look at the story of like June, how she essentially started talking after her sister died, you know, it's so interesting because they say, well, she said that, well, I believe both of them said that one of them had to die so the other one could live, and they both believed that Jennifer had to die so June could live. And the minute June started living, she started really being who she was called to be. And I hate to say it in a sense like that Jennifer was June's shadow, which is kind of unpleasant thing to say, but that's the reality of it all, because we have shadows amongst us that attach themselves to us. So they were an actual set of twins, and I had a spiritual twin. And I had a spiritual twin that followed me throughout my years, which was my trauma, my shadow, which was following me and basically causing me to live in this lower vibration of myself, of not walking in my true confidence and not walking in my personality. So when you see this story, you are basically seeing a glimpse of my life. A lot of people look at these girls as creepy, and they weren't really creepy. They was just unable to talk. They were unable to say anything, because spiritually speaking, we know when we believe in God, right? This is Everything is spiritually inclined. Everything is connected. It's a spiritual understanding to it. But it's almost like trauma before you come out of the womb, because the thing about it, when you're selectively mute, it's almost like you feel like you were born that way, because there's no real reason that you would be traumatized, right? So you come out with, it's almost like you come out with your parents trauma times 1,000. Because it's very interesting. I believe both of my parents were bullied when they were younger. So it's like I took on the curses of that trauma, and it manifested into me being mute. The trauma was so great that I turned mute. Like, I felt the effects of that, and I became mute out of the womb. So, you know, it's a lot to this, and it's a lot to it's layers to what they had to endure, because that disorder is such a great thing that causes high levels of anxiety. And the anxiety is so great that you freeze up. You can't talk. You can't speak. You can't defend yourself. You can't even say that you want to go to the bathroom. And one of the symptoms of selective mutism is that you will defecate on yourself. You will pee on yourself because you're so afraid to even speak, to even allow people to hear your voice. You know, and you have this overwhelming amount of stress on you to not be noticed, and it's really stressful as a kid. I still remember how it felt, you know. And then when you finally talk, you relieve yourself. You know what I mean? So whenever I see this story, it's like, it's so interesting because it's so insane, right? This is one thing that I noticed. I don't believe in past lives or anything like that, right? At all. I'm a believer in Yah. But I really find it weird that Jennifer died right before I was conceived. Right before I was conceived in 1993. She died March 9th, or I think March 8th or March 9th, 1993. I had to have been conceived around that time because I was born in December of 1993. And I was so puzzled by that. You know what I mean? And you got to remember, selective mutism and elective mutism is a very rare anxiety disorder among mostly children. Some let it linger and let it linger, and it gets worse and worse and worse. And that means that, honestly, in the spiritual realm, that just means the demon just grew and grew and grew and grew. And the crazy thing is, a lot of people will say, "Oh, you were just shy." No, 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 no. I was not just shy. It was like almost like a split personality. Literally, I would, in public, I would not say one word. They literally thought I was mentally challenged. And I would go home and have a complete conversation with my family. It wasn't, I couldn't turn it on or off. I could not. It was, I don't know what to tell you. A lot of people think, oh, they just exaggerating. But no, it is it's a very hard thing to deal with, because like I said, you feel like you're trapped in your body, and you want to perform, you want to speak, you want to say things, but you just can't do it. And it just makes you feel so burdened with, you know, life. But it's a real disorder, and I don't really believe in disorders. It was a real demon, you know. It was a real spiritual thing that I had to deal with, and these girls had to deal with. But it just grew in these girls, because I feel like when you have an actual twin, when you're born with an actual twin, the bond between those twins, man, and a lot of twins go through these trauma bonds, these bonds in general. They just go through them, and it's hard to untether yourself. It's hard to disconnect yourself from the person that looks just like you, that share the same DNA as you. Y'all are literally the same exact person. And then you have cases like me, where I had a spiritual twin that manifested in the physical, and I had a special bond with a certain person, and I don't even realize what his childhood was, but this is what the result of it was. It was spiritual trauma to a whole nother level.